So I think we will try and make a start, ladies and gentlemen. If you could come to the front and... So for those that have joined our pavilion today, welcome to the Concrete Future GCCA pavilion. We're delighted to be at COP29. For those that are joining online, of course, you're very welcome. Apologies for the slight change in time. We wanted to accommodate the Vice Chancellor's schedule, and he will be joining us in about 30 minutes. So hopefully you're at the right place. We're here to launch low carbon and near zero definitions for cement and concrete. I'm Paul Adelecki with the GCCA, and we've been at COP29 for the last week, and we're here until the end. The GCCA, for those that don't know, represents the cement manufacturers and concrete manufacturers around the world. We represent around 80% of cement production outside of China, as well as a number of key China players. We're CEO-led organization, which means the commitment that our members have made to a net zero future is really in the hands of the CEOs to deliver that. And we're at COP29 to talk about both the progress that we as a sector and industry are making. And we have just launched our latest progress report. Do look online for that, and you can pick up a copy in the audience today. It goes through all the different levers of our roadmap, talking about the progress that we're making, but also the challenges that our industry faces and how we can really unlock an acceleration in decarbonisation in these key next few years as we move through the decade to deliver. And indeed, procurement is a key part of that, is a key part of our policy asks. And that's why we're delighted to be launching these definitions today. We've got an amazing panel of speakers who I will introduce very shortly. We also have the Vice Chancellor of Germany to help us launch formally the definitions. But I first want to invite Dr. Andrew Minson to the stage. Andrew is my colleague at the GCCA. He's the Concrete and Sustainable Construction Director with a tremendous experience in the built environment. He is a structural engineer and a fellow of both ICE and structural engineering. He does all our work across the built environment and was instrumental in leading the work on our 2050 net zero roadmap. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Andrew.
Paul, thank you very much, and may I join Paul to you all on our pavilion. That's probably a good place to start, Paul. If we just start with the roadmap that we launched in 2021, and Paul has already made reference to this document, which is our progress and action report, which has lots of case studies from what our members are doing, plus progress against our roadmap. So just a quick reminder on this roadmap. It identifies the different levers to get from business as usual in the top right-hand corner down to zero in the bottom right corner, with the horizontal axis beginning at 2020. So it's a whole life roadmap, whole project roadmap, which means the top green relate to how cement and concrete is used by people down the value chain. So I'm a structural engineer, as Paul said. So the role of my colleagues in structural engineering is this 22% at the top. It's really important that engineers recognize what they can do in developing a resilient, low-carbon built environment, and part of that is using the material in a really efficient way. Across all these different levers, and you can go to the roadmap and the website's there. Across all of these levers, fundamental policies are required to enable industry to act, to enable people down the value chain to act, to enable structural engineers to deliver that 22%, to enable architects to deliver the 22%. And on this stage in the last week, we've had architects talking about how they're going to use the material more efficiently and the guidance they're producing for their professions. One of the key policies behind all this is low carbon procurement. And fundamental to low carbon procurement is knowing, well, what is low carbon? I mean, if we're going to design, if we're going to procure something that's low carbon, what is that? Ultimately, we want a low carbon built environment, low carbon projects, resilient projects at that scale of project level, city level. If we then break it down to building blocks, there's a point in the whole procurement process where we purchase product. So if you're designing a new building, you're passing the information to a contractor to procure the right material. If Paul produces the material and I produce the material, you want to be able to differentiate between my lower carbon product and Paul's low carbon product. And so you need to have definitions to do that. So we're building on the work of the International Energy Agency that published this report in 2022. So on this graph, there's on this slide, on the left-hand side, there's steel, and on the right-hand side, there's cement. So under the G7, Germany's presidency of the G7 in 2022, they commissioned the IEA to do this work on production of steel and production of cement. And I just wanted you to focus in and remember these 5 bullet points. I'm going to come back to these 5 bullet points in about 4 slides' time, and I won't embarrass everyone and ask and test you on them, but these 5 bullet points are important. We're going to come back to these again. So what did the IEA do in 2022? What they did was they separated out definitions from targets. There's a little nuance on that, but generally they separated definitions. They said an E is an E, a D is a D, and we're just going to say that is low carbon production, and the near zero production at the bottom is the green one at the bottom. That's where the nuance is. That also is a target as well as a definition, because the IEA is looking across the whole industrial sector, all the energy sector, and they're identifying what remaining emissions might be available to, or need to be inevitably available to, the steel industry and the cement industry. Hence, they've got this near zero definition at the bottom. So there's a sort of separation of definitions and targets. The near zero band, I've already said, is the destination at 2050. And that, actually, in 2022, was actually the first time we'd seen that. Lots of regions and state and cities have come up with definitions. Generally, what they do is they say, what are we doing now? And let's look at what improvement is compared to now. The IEA were the first to actually put a flag in the sand and say that for production, this is the ultimate, the near zero, this is the ultimate endpoint that we want to get to. They then looked at what the upper bound should be, the upper bound of E, and they did that by defining what recognized good practice is. And then they just split that between 5 different bands. I mean, they could have chosen 6 or 8, but they chose 5. Final bullet point. The same static bands for all countries. There's 2 aspects to that. Static and the same for all countries. Now, why? I mean, static doesn't sound very exciting, but many of the schemes that try and do this, they start with a baseline or a benchmark at the top, which then gets revised in 3 years' time, gets revised in 6 years' time. Because what is defined as low carbon is going to be more aggressive, more onerous in the future. But by not having something static, we're not going to be able to recognize what the improvement is when we look back over time. So it doesn't sound very revolutionary, but believe me, in this area it actually was. So we've got steel on the left, and we've got cement on the right. And you've got those 5 bullet points. Now I just want to zone in on the different slopes, the different angles. So for the steel industry, now I'm not an expert in the steel industry, but many of us are familiar with, there's scrap steel can be used in an electric arc furnace to create new steel, or you can go to iron ore and create it in a basic oxygen furnace. And those different techniques have a different carbon footprint. And so in trying to define what low carbon is, they've come up with a sloping line where the horizontal axis is based on the amount of scrap steel available to the manufacturer. Essentially, it's saying that if you're a manufacturer who's got a availability of scrap steel and electric arc furnace, what is low carbon for you should be a much lower number. So the top of E for the steel, when you've got 100% scrap, is very low. And in that industry, scrap steel, basically all the scrap steel is being used. And so therefore, they're trying to differentiate, they're trying to enable incentives for those who still are having to use iron ore. Now that analogy has been applied on the cement sector. One of the decarbonisation levers we have that was on the roadmap I just showed you before is to combine with clinker, which becomes which is the precursor to ordinary cement, to combine with that ordinary cement materials from other sectors. It might be fly ash, it might be ground granulated blast furnace slag, or calcined clay. Combine those materials which have a much lower carbon footprint with the clinker precursor to cement. In that way, we decarbonize, or we reduce the carbon in our product. So on this horizontal axis for cement, the IEA proposed that we do a clinker cement ratio. So the more of this supplementary material you put in, if you're a manufacturer, if Paul was a manufacturer and he gets down to 0.5, then he's actually got a much lower value for his E. Whereas if I'm not using any of this material, I might be up here, and I've got a much higher value. Now, what this actually does is that by having a slope, it sort of disincentivizes me doing anything. If I start lowering my ratio, if I start using these waste materials from elsewhere, actually my target value gets lower. So I lose my incentive of using this really important decarbonisation lever. So whereas in the steel sector, all the scrap steel is being used, and there's validity in this slope, in our sector, all this material to reduce the clinker cement ratio is not currently being used. There are countries where government procurement still requires these sorts of cements here and don't recognize the benefit of this. So I'm drawing this out because this methodology of the IEA has been built upon by the German industry and German government, and what they've decided to do is take a static value on the left-hand side. So that left-hand graph is the same graph as you saw on the previous slide, but the Germans have chosen to take a static value at 0.7 and then use that to create this graph here where the A, B, C, D, etc., those values are irrespective of the clinker cement ratio. A really important differentiation, and it's exactly what in the definitions we're launching today for cement and concrete, we've done exactly the same as what the Germans have done. So 2 points here, which I'll just focus on. The first point is that we will adopt. We're not trying to create our own thing as a GCCA, as an industry, which with members around the world. We're not trying to do our own thing. We build on what the IEA has done, and we accept their graph, and in bold, and countries should choose the value that's appropriate for them in terms of a static definition. Secondly, the IEA work was on production level, but in the construction industry, the communication of footprint, CO2 footprint, is via EPDs. And therefore, we recommend that EPDs are used. So that was the cement definitions, not done by IEA, so the concrete definitions were up for grabs. So we produced this graph here. So these are the concrete definitions we're launching today. And you can see they look pretty similar. The slope on this is not to do with clinker cement ratio, it's to do with strength. Let's just highlight that. So a few minutes ago I said 5 bullet points you need to remember. The black font here is exactly the same bullet points as we saw for cement, because on developing the concrete definitions, we're wanting to use those same principles as the IEA used for cement. Separation definitions and targets, bands A to E, near zero band defined by 2050, upper bound of band E, recognizing current good practice, which we've done from global sourcing of information. And the same static bands for all countries, which means that countries can report to one another. And another benefit is if you're an investor in the property sector, if you're an architect, if you're a client operating across boundaries, the same definitions apply. So I've just got one final slide to explain these definitions a little bit more. These 5 bullet points at the top are the identical 5 bullet points we keep on seeing. In addition to that, because it's concrete, we've got a few extra things. First of all, we've added a band F and G at the top, because we want this to be available for all concretes. We're not saying that an F and a G, and the G is open-ended. We're not saying an F and G is low carbon. We're just saying this is the rating for it. But it means that every producer anywhere in the world and every architect everywhere in the world can say, actually, you know, in this country I can use an F and a G. We've named the near zero one AA just for practicality. And if you want to, in the future, you can have a AAA, which is below zero. And I've said we've categorized it on strength across the bottom. So we're delighted today to launch these definitions and to be joined by colleagues. We would like just to make reference to the IDDI. We've worked alongside these are the GCCA definitions. They're the GCCA definitions. They are not the IDDI definitions at all. But we're really grateful the input that they've had in us developing them and us shaping them. They've got some work here on harmonization of EPDs and PCRs, which we fully support. We fully support that fact that EPDs should be the same globally. They're currently not. So if you go to the detail of our documentation, you'll see how we're accommodating that difference in EPDs now in the definitions we're launching today. And so for example, the UK, we're currently working in progress to adapt it for some particularities in the UK. And you can read more on this slide from our website here.
Thank you, Andrew. So that's all available on the GCCA website, and you can send your questions in to the GCCA if you have if you want to follow up on the detail of this. So thanks so much, Andrew. Let's move now to our panel. I'll invite them all up individually. Firstly, I want to invite up Dr. Beat Baron, who is the Director General for Industry of the German government. And she's worked worked in the German government since 2012. She's a qualified lawyer. She's worked in energy policy, worked at the EU Commission, and holds a doctorate from European law. So thank you so much for joining us today. Can I invite up Sanjay Seth, who is the Sustainable Infrastructure Programme at TERI, the Energy and Resource Institute, is also the CEO of the Green Rating for Integrated Habitat Assessment Council, and a good friend of the GCCA. I would also like to invite up Emna Bashar. She is Director of Sustainability Commission at the IUA, the International Union of Architects. She runs her own design practice and is very involved in the Global Alliance for Building and Construction. And then finally, Andrew Minson joins us as well to make up the panel. I think my first question, though, has to go to Dr. Beat Baron around procurement. And really, as the co-chair and the member of the SEM IDDI, which Andrew has mentioned, and the vital work that Germany did as the G7 lead, how low carbon procurement, how and why it's important in Germany.
Yes, thank you very much. And first of all, congratulations to GCCA. This is a very important launching event today, so congratulations to that. And yes, public procurement is key. It can be a key driver and is an important instrument in our portfolio on our way to decarbonization. And we are very much involved in international cooperation because international cooperation is key. So you saw it at the slide, we are involved in the IDDI, and we made progress here. So the building sector, here we had a pledge, and Germany is now doing its completing work here. So this is really crucial. We need those pledges, but we need standards, developing of standards of definition on emission intensity. So this is crucial. Both sides are crucial. And of course, we are very much involved in the Climate Club. Over 40 countries are involved here, and this as well gives clear signals how important standards are, how important standards definitions on green steel, green cement are, and so this can really build up demand signals, and this I think is crucial to work on international corporations here.
Fantastic. So my next question I think goes to Emma, and I guess your members are really involved in low carbon and resilient projects. Can you just broaden the picture out about sort of developing more sustainable projects and sustainability?
Yes, first of all, thank you for inviting me here. And as a representative of the International Union of Architects, representing global North and global South architecture, I would like first to recall some figures that demonstrate that concrete is still one of the most widely used product. We know that figures say that by 2050, 70% of the population will be urban. And by 2100, Africa will be the biggest home of the world. So it's important to think about decarbonizing in this part of the world. And my first thought is about how developing this this sustainable concrete in countries of the south.
Perfect, Emna.
Challenge.
And actually, I'll pass over to Sanjay now to talk a little bit about the Global South and India. Terry, with the GCCA, is really trying to drive forward a roadmap in India, a net zero roadmap. If you talk a bit about the development of that roadmap, but then also the role of procurement within it, how important that is.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Paul. And again, on my own behalf, I congratulate the GCCA for this wonderful initiative that we are assembled here to launch. As you know that we are in India, we are urbanizing very rapidly, and our infrastructure, which you see currently, is going to multiply many times in the years ahead. Say, for example, by 2030, we expect that there is, what we see currently is there's going to be a big boom. We have probably only about 35%, and what we are going to see in the years ahead, in the next decade or so, we'll see a boom where 70% of the remaining infrastructure, or maybe 65% of the remaining infrastructure, is going to be put in place. Now, this infrastructure obviously means a lot of cement and concrete, a lot of it, all of this is going to be there. So it's incumbent. The policies of the government are so conducive to be pushing the green procurement, and especially given the kind of scales that we are talking about. We have the scales of economy, and we can bring down, in case there is a price headway, then we are in a position to bring down these prices through the scaling up and the aggregation of demand. And that's where currently the focus is. The policies are there, the demand is there, and it's the supply push and the demand pull that is kind of driving it. And we hope that as we are mindful of the fact that if we don't do this now, we get locked in for the next 60, 70 years. So it's incumbent upon us, the policies are so developed that we need to make sure that we are on a low carbon pathway. The energy transition that is required both in producing and in kind of putting the future infrastructure in place does not see a lock-in happening as we move ahead. Yeah, so I'll stop there. Yeah, thank you.
So, Andrew, I think we've heard a little bit there about the complexities and how policy can fit and unravel them. And complexities, certainly construction is complex. How does complexity fit within the development of our work for the definitions?
Yeah, no, thanks, Paul. We're well known as being a really complex industry, the construction industry. In terms of developing these definitions, actually, we've got a bit of an advantage as a cement sector because actually we've got a very short supply chain. The cement manufacturer is near where the site of the limestone. And then the cement manufacturer, then that goes to the concrete producer. It's a heavy material, so therefore there isn't a huge amount of global trade. There is global trade. Carbon leakage is an important factor. But in terms of these definitions, actually, that short supply chain has really helped us compared to... the other day, I was on a panel with people from the automotive industry, and the complexity of their supply chain is extraordinary. And so for the steel sector to have definitions when their product is going into construction and automotives and lots of different sectors, it's very difficult for them. Our material, short supply chain, and it's all going into construction. So that makes it easier for us to have done what we've done. But as Emma was saying earlier, the complexity of where the material then goes in terms of the architect and the engineer and the designer and the developer and many clients who are just one-off clients, that is very complex. And so therefore the simplicity of these definitions to enable that complex value chain to procure and send clear demand signals for lower carbon products is really important for us.
Fantastic. So picking up on that, a question then to Dr. Baron. So in Germany, you've worked with the cement industry, obviously based, and our definitions are based on the IEA work, and which you led in terms of the presidency of the G7. How important is it to collaborate with industry, both the cement industry and wider, on this kind of work?
Yes, for us it was very important. So we developed a concept on green lead markets, which we published this year, and we worked together with stakeholders from industry, from academia, from institutions, non-governmental organizations, and this was really crucial because we need clear definitions. Markets, businesses, governments, we all need to know what is green and what is grey, and therefore we need clear standards. And we need international cooperation, because only if we have international cooperation, international definitions, and moving on from definitions then maybe to principles and maybe then to standards, we can have really impact on global demand. But this we can only have internationally, and therefore it's really crucial to have IDDI and Climate Club and other international clubs and institutionals.
Indeed, and we're delighted to collaborate with those organisations as well, and wider. You know, part of the role of the GCCA is to take where there's really good case studies, really good best practice, and talk to our members right around the world, many of which are here today. And so Andrew, picking up on that, how can we take the good example of the work in Germany and broaden that out?
Yeah, no, we've got a network of national and regional cement and concrete associations with whom we work really closely. I did flash up just briefly something from the UK adoption of this, and we're working closely with them and many in other countries already. So we've got that infrastructure in place. The global roadmap I showed, we've got national roadmaps as well. They all are talking about low carbon procurement policy. So this is where government wants to do it and industry want to do it. So the collaboration that we've seen in Germany, we can replicate in other countries as well. In your country, wherever you're from, we'd love to work with our industry, connecting our industry with the government there to implement these definitions.
Okay, that's great. And Emna, we talked a little bit about kind of this criticality of procurement and definitions. How does that work in your, for you and your colleagues in the design world, but in particular how you work with EPDs?
It's a good question. I would like to highlight the importance of make it simple to architects in order to explain to the client, and in order to, because the client thinks money. So what can you do to architects to make it simple and easy communicate all over the world? Yeah.
So that's a question back to me. So,
yes.
So I mean, I did real projects for 10 years, and I was fortunate enough to work on architect-led projects. And as a structural engineer, when I started, I did a lot of analysis, and I have to admit that for the first year, I wondered, what does the architect do? What does the architect do? But 10 years on, I learned that actually architects do a huge amount, unbelievable amount, not just. I won't go into detail. So it means that your point about simplicity, I absolutely get it. Because, you as architects are involved in so many materials far beyond what the structural engineer is involved with, and the complexity is enormous. So we have to have something that's simple. And that really has driven what we've got. People might say we haven't got something perfect, but we absolutely have something good enough and sufficient enough to make this work. And if we go for perfect, it'll be so complex that the architects will never adopt it. So your point is really well made. And I'll just draw on the global south, global north bit as well. So we have had approach from one country which said, actually, we've looked at what's happening, what you've done and what other people are doing in their countries, and we don't think what they're doing is applicable to our country. But it is. I just want to show you, it is. We've built a wheel, and you can put your own rubber tire on the wheel to suit your country. If you then reject that wheel because for whatever reason, that's fine, but talk to us first, and I'm absolutely convinced you'll say, thank you for inventing the wheel, and we'll just put a rubber tire on it and make it applicable to our country.
Oh, great. And while we've got Beat, before she leaves and the Vice-Chancellor starts, another question really about, so definitions are just one part. How does that fit in, and how important are setting up wider sustainability ambitions for a nation state?
Yeah, of course we need definitions for those standards for steel, cement, concrete, and this needs to fit into our goals, of course, and it does. In our German methodology, it does fit towards our path towards climate neutrality. And this is, of course, essential because this is why we are doing it. And we developed, or our industry association developed labels. So label can be a very good tool to show the market what is green, what is grey, and to give this impact on the market. So we have a less label, so developed by the Green Steel Association, and our cement association is developing something similar for cement. And we do think we have to start somewhere, and to start with definitions, then develop maybe labels, and then come to standards. This could be really a good way forward.
So develop Germany, and what about fast developing India? How do you think that fits in there?
So as I said that we need to keep evaluating. Once we have identified a pathway for low carbon emissions, and the Honorable Prime Minister has said that we need to be a carbon neutral economy by 2070. So every player in the economy needs to get their act together. Now, obviously, when people start looking at, and the point that you made about evaluating and seeing how we can evaluate if someone says that I've got a low carbon or low emitting substance, then I think the roles of agencies which are tasked with kind of providing the ratings, say for example to the upcoming infrastructure, we have the GRIHA rating, the Green Rating for Integrated Habitat Assessment. There we've made it mandatory that if the cement and the steel and the concrete that you're going to be using, if it is low carbon, you get an edge by scoring higher as compared to the business as usual. That rating helps us to push the markets. Also, in terms of policy, we've got the carbon markets kicking in, and obviously people who manufacture material with lower carbon emissions are going to benefit through the trading mechanism that is put in place. So I think the push and the pull are there in the market. It's just that scaling up and adoption is something which is need there, and rating agencies such as GRIHA and the others can play a significant role in driving up markets.
That's fantastic. And so back to Under, I think, to try and expand on the global level of driving roadmaps. Part of the work of the GCCA, we published our roadmap in 2021, and we're now, through our Net Zero Accelerator program, working with as many countries as possible to have national roadmaps. And of course, that's the work we've been doing with you in India. How's that work going wider, Andrew, with other countries?
Yeah, so far, pretty good, actually, in terms of, let's go to India. So it is Sanjay's team at Terry that are supporting the industry with the India roadmap. Essentially, all the numbers are there, and we're very much hoping that may even be launched this calendar year. We're absolutely delighted that we've got a memorandum of understanding with the China Cement Association to be using the same methodology as we've used globally. The same methodology is being used in India to develop their roadmap. And in fact, it's the German industry that we keep on mentioning. It's colleagues there who have worked alongside us on the global roadmap, and will be working with the Chinese industry on their roadmap. And in fact, just here on Friday, Azerbaijan launched their roadmap, and Henning was a key part of that. And once again, it was our colleagues at VDZ who helped them with that. So the roadmaps are there. Now, they're very similar. We in some respects, it's much easier for our industry. We haven't got either technology A or technology B or technology C. Actually, the graph that I showed earlier on, we need all of those different elements, and they're all compatible with each other. And that's the same globally. So the purpose of doing the national roadmaps is to work out what the emphasis or the balance is between each of those. That's part of the reason. You know what the main reason is? The main reason is to get the industry to buy into it, to work with government alongside them, and to identify the policy enablers that are required. That's actually the main reason for doing it. So we as a GCCA, we do not do national roadmaps. We are a catalyst for the countries to do it themselves. We provide the infrastructure, we provide the methodology, so there's consistency between what China and India and Germany have done. But it's for the countries to do it so that we get the roadmap owned by the industry, owned by the country, and actually for the emerging economies, and I know, Emma, that's really close to you, that is a mechanism by which the global north and the funding agencies, the multilateral development banks, the bilateral agreements between more wealthy countries and less wealthy. They want these national roadmaps so that the technologies have been identified and they know the industry is committed, so that we can get real projects happening on this decarbonisation journey.
So Emna, how can we really drive this work in North Africa? Obviously, you're from Tunisia. Do you see that happening? Are you positive for the developments there?
I'm always positive, so let's stay positive. But I would like to highlight the importance of breaking silos between architecture and engineering. When we have to choose a sustainable solution, like for example sustainable concrete, it's important to involve engineers at the earlier stage of the design process, to be able to calculate and to budgetize eventually additional costs that could be that are inherent to this kind of solutions. So this is very important at all the levels of the design.
It really is, and I think Terry does some of that work, really trying to break down the silos between engineering and architecture and the manufacturers. Do you want to talk a little bit about that work in India?
Yeah, so I think, I completely agree with her that the silo approach doesn't work. And if you really want to see transformative climate action taking place, it's an integrated approach that we require. So that is where we work together with industry, with the standard-setting agencies, with the policymakers, together with the manufacturers. All of them are working together with us to ensure that we are on that, abiding to the policies that have been framed by the government. And target setting, I think all of that is in place. We've set our own targets to make sure that we are on a pathway which is near zero. As we move ahead, we kind of keep ratcheting up the standards to make sure that we are higher and we start achieving higher and higher than what we have already on the pathway that we are already on.
And we must get the perspective from Germany about breaking down barriers, breaking down silos, collaboration. You're an exemplar in that. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, please?
Yes, as I said, we developed our concept on green lead markets together with industry and all stakeholders, and it's important to continue this dialogue, because now we have a concept, the nitty-gritty work starts, and especially for public procurement, you have to convince all actors, right? Because it's something new, and if something new, we are maybe somehow resistant, and we don't want it, and we don't like it. And so you have to really speak to all actors. And in Germany, these are, of course, the federal states, the regions, and so on. But this needs to be done. And it's not only a task for public actors, but for private procurement as well. There are a number of private actors involved here as well. And it's a process, and we have to move it forward. And the more partners we have and the more international it is, the better.
Exactly. So we have a really interesting audience, a few of which I recognise. It is a panel session. I will ask a question of the floor. Does anybody have a question for this distinguished panel? Anybody? Any questions? If you could say the name of your organisation and yourself and who you represent, and then a brief question. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Henning Sasse. Actually, I'm a German citizen, CEO of Norm Cement, and also founding chairman of the local cement association. May I ask a question to Germany, because you said you just started this, and because we now want to do the same here in Azerbaijan, and we ask ourselves how can we implement such standards, and we will have discussions with our government representatives here in Azerbaijan. But what is planned in Germany? For example, is it also planned to make this or integrate this into legislation, or will this rather be voluntarily? Or I understand you are in the beginning of the process. But what are the plans, and what, from your point of view, would be an ideal situation or an ideal setup that these new standards are driving the use of green cement?
Thank you, Henning.
Yes, thank you. Very important question. So as I said, we started with a concept on green lead markets and to really show here are the definitions. And those definitions have been developed by the IEA. So they are have an international basis and they are on the table and can be used by partners. So this, I think, is a very important signal. And then, of course, we have so far labels on a voluntary basis developed by the, as I said, by the German Steel Association, and the Cement Association will present one label soon. And of course, it's a task for public procurement law, where we might need legal changes, so to make it useful and to have obligations to public procurement to use these labels. And then when it comes to standards, then we have a task on the European level, because it wouldn't make sense to have it on a national level and then it differs but among the EU member states. So when it really comes to market standards, then we need the European Union. And this is why we presented a concept based on an IEA definition to make it possible that the EU may take it on board, and then we can try it on a European level. But we need the EU level.
Fantastic. Fantastic to hear. Any more questions from the floor? I think we have time for one more question before the Vice-Chancellor arrives to help us formally launch these definitions.
Yeah, my name is Dieter Moppold. I'm from the NDE Germany, and we're supporting the technological mechanism. And we are also having an event today, this afternoon, on how to abate industry. So we have a policy paper issued as a recommendation for developing countries, bringing that how to abate industries into NDCs. So I have a question to Andrew. You've mentioned that you have all partners on the private sector in developing countries. Do you think like a mechanism like the UN and the CDCN, for example, and I know that GCCA is already engaged with the CDCN, can help you to bring the standards, and congratulations for your standards, in the dialogue with governments in the different countries?
Yes, Dietmar, thanks so much for that question. I think that we've heard a lot about the Climate Club and your presidency of that, and your work with Chile in the Climate Club, and your membership of IDDI. Now we've mentioned the CTCN, which is a formal body under the UNFCCC. There's also something called the Cement and Concrete Breakthrough that countries are part of. We're delighted to have Germany as a member of that. These multilateral government initiatives are really important for us to be able to communicate what we're doing, but also for you as leading countries to share what you're doing and explain how it can be done in other countries. And we just had the question for Azerbaijan, how can I do this in our country? So we see those as really valuable mechanisms, and there's membership of those in the Global North and Global South.
Fantastic. So I see that the Vice-Chancellor's arrived. That's fantastic. So we can begin to sort of formally launch these definitions. But first, can we say a round of applause to our really distinguished panel and thank them for their important insights. So just before I introduce the Vice-Chancellor, I want to really invite on stage the CEO of the Global Cement and Concrete Association, Tom Aguillo. Tom has worked in the cement industry for more than 20 years, leading some of the sustainability work at Holcim, at Geocycle before he joined the GCCA, and is a real passionate advocate for sustainability. Thomas, do you want to say a few words then about the launch?
Sure, thank you, Paul. Well, Vice Chancellor, my address is first to you, onto Germany as you represent. So as the Minister of Economical Affairs and Climate, it's really an honor to have you on our pavilion to launch this low carbon or near zero cement and concrete definition. It's an important for our industry, and I'll come back to that. But before that, I really want to give my sincere thanks to the leadership of Germany on a number of things that are really important for us and for advancing the climate discussion, in particular in the heavy emitting industries. I'm referring to the Climate Club, of course, that you are chairing. I'm referring to your position as a donor of the UNIDO with in particular the IKI system, and I see Philippe is in the audience. And I'm referring also into your support in the breakthrough cement discussion, where we are leading on organizing a cross-country learning on discussion on how to advance, in particular, the regulation. It was also under the presidency of Germany that the G7 was asked to work on the definition for the low carbon and near zero cement in product. as a product, as a production. It is, and it was a robust starting point for us to work together with the IDDI on the UNIDO on the same leadership to work on the development of this low carbon or net zero in product definition. So we have it now for cement and concrete. It's important, and we look forward to work with every countries to adopt this definition all over the world, and in particular with the countries that are part of the IDDI and that are part of the breakthrough cement. So, as leader, again, Germany was the first country to adopt this definition and to work on it and make it possible, especially for concrete. Concrete is important, in particular for the emerging and developing economies, because concrete is really the backbone of the modern society. And you said it, we had the representative from India, from Terry, that mentioned that. So much more infrastructure, housing, development will be needed in these countries. And we are at a crossroad today to say, do we now build in these countries, in these economies, do we build green or do we build grey? And that's a fundamental piece, and that's where the work we are doing now is so essential. So we really call everybody to work on this definition, to take it, to work on the procurement program that goes with it, that is enabled through these definitions. And yes, it's a big tech for us, and we are very happy, and I'm delighted to launch formally this net zero, low carbon and net zero definition for cement and concrete. Bravo. Thank you very much.
Bravo, bravo, bravo. Fantastic. So officially launched, Thomas. That's really great news, and you can find the definitions on the GCCA website. But really now it's my great privilege and honor to introduce you to the Vice Chancellor of Germany, Federal Minister for Economic Affairs and Climate Action. He has a doctorate from the University of Hamburg in philosophy. Also a really important advocate and writer of literature and children's books, but more importantly, on the world stage, an important advocate both for Germany and indeed for climate action. So it's my great privilege to invite you to say a round of applause to Dr. Robert Habeck, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks to the concrete and cement industry for hosting this event and making this happen. From my point of view, this is really an important step also in the history of the COP. The COP started by political debate about climate action, the importance, the necessity of climate action. That was a political debate, I would say, only. Then the next phase was bringing this debate into the energy sector. So how much fossil energy should be burned or can be burned or must not be burned in the future, increase the scale up of renewable energy and everything related to that, CO2 pricing systems and so on and so forth. But the industry was not so much in the focus of the history of the COP. And now this is, I would like to say, the first real event where real concrete, funny to say, concrete results are presented in the face of the COP. So this is an important stepstone in the face of the COP and definitely not the last one. From my point of view, I would say that this is the next level of the history of the COP that we are now entering. So how is this level came to life? First of all, I have to say, as Minister for Economic Affairs, you don't have to convince most of the industries that they should produce climate neutral. Of course, there's always calculation about the revenues and the investments and so on and so forth, but I would say all of the leaders of industries are also inhabitants of the world. Most of them have children. Most of them have the same debates as politicians have at their kitchen table at home and are asked by their children or grandchildren, father, grandfather, mother, what are you doing to make the next world also a world where I can live in, and how can you help to bring CO2 emissions down and stop or at least decrease global warming? So there is a willingness, of course, but when it comes to concrete action, it's always a little bit more complicated. Therefore, these results presented for a leading market for green concrete and cement is really an important step because it becomes now so real. How have we entered this space? We just heard that Germany looked into the proposals of the IRA, a definition how green concrete and cement could be measured. Why is it so complicated? Well, of course, if you think about it only a little bit, you see that everything becomes more complex in reality. Saying that a concrete building has this or that amount of CO2 does not only mean that we have to look into the energy that is used, but also in the materials that are used, in the supply chains. Where are the materials coming from? The circumstances of the extraction of the materials. So you see that it's a complicated, or it becomes a little bit more complicated than just saying use renewable energy if you're producing concrete or cement, or at least do carbon capture. So this was proposed by the IRA, then Germany discussed it with our companies in Germany, and now then this leads us to this event. Then it was adopted by the International Committee of the Concrete and Cement Industries. Thanks for this great work, and thanks for making this a concrete proposal for green markets in concrete cement. I have to underline that concrete is really new. Cement was discussed earlier, mainly with regard to CCS and CCU. Concrete is really new. And to make this happen and bring it into reality, I have the honor to announce that we are now doing a concrete project together with Brazil, where we are funding with 25 million euros a concrete project where concrete and cement should produce green in Brazil, and I hope that this is adopted then hundreds and thousands times in the next years to come. Thank you. You have laid the groundstone, and thanks you once again to launch this event. Thank you very much.
So much. Amazing work from the Minister there. And he connected to the importance of COP. I think we all can understand that. And just to talk a little bit about COP30, we have the special or the extraordinary advisor for COP30, Alistair Morias Aloring Vogas. If you could please join us and say a few words. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot to GCCA, for the warm invitation to come here. On behalf of the Brazilian government, it's a really pleasure for us. Dear Vice Chancellor Thomas. This is actually the example of a new chapter of the Brazilian-Germany relationship and efforts to bring the Paris Agreement to life. We know we want to work and efforts in forestry, and we're working on agriculture, and working in several industries. But the industry decarbonization is a new chapter for Brazil. And this is important because, as we know, the reindustrialization of Brazil is aligned with the goal of decarbonizing the world global economy, and it's also a priority aligned with our domestic interests. I'm sure most of you may have seen that we have just launched our NDC, which is also very much aligned with the domestic national plans, the new Brazil industry, the Brazilian climate plan, and it's all linked from bringing to the strengthening the multilateral process to the reality on the ground. We need to do that. And we know that the cement and concrete sectors are crucial to this. As you may know, cement alone accounts for around 70% of the industrial emissions in Brazil. So this is something, when we come to a place like this, we always tend to think about Brazil through its forests, but we need to think about this other element as well. So I think it's important to look into this project, which is going to establish a strong innovation system to drive significant CO2 emissions in reducing the transitions on steel and cement. These industries are indispensable to the global development. So in Brazil, we recognize this urgency. We want to bring this urgency to the COP30, acknowledging that, of course, as we are here at COP29, we can't divert all the energy to COP30 thinking as well, but we are very much opening, we are here to open our engagement, our efforts, our listening to all of you to bring your ideas, to shape the climate action agenda, but also how can we link this with the negotiations as we go forward. So I wanted to close by saying that this is the spirit of the COP30 in Brazil that we want to bring here, a spirit to strengthen multilateralism, to foster climate ambition of all countries, but all sectors alike, and to showcasing this implementation. This partnership with Germany is one example. We want to have many others. So thank you so much for the invitation, and it's a pleasure. Thank you.
And on behalf of the GCCA and the global cement industry, can we say we stand ready to support this great work and to play our part at COP30 as well. So we just want to now say thank you to all our speakers. Thank you certainly to the Vice-Chancellor and to yourself for those inspiring words. We are going to take a couple of photos. We've now officially launched these really important definitions which play a really important piece in procurement and driving our mission to a net zero future. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests.
Well, I think we'll just do these.